like literally nobody watches. And like nobody, it's like 2 or 3 people watch the video in its lifetime, but whatever.
And then like my mom probably.
Yeah. And it is sometimes weird. Someone's like, some of my team are like, oh yeah, I've been watching all of the wine coaches, and I'm like, there's 29 of them. Like, why are you watching who has 29 hours to watch me talking about wine?
But they
Like
probably
some
just
kind
put
of
them on while they're like doing the dishes.
Dumbo.
Stuck in some weird YouTube holes where I'm like, how have I been watching this for 5 hours now? And it's like, I'm not even like willing to share the YouTube holes I end up in, but like they happen. It happens.
Oh, I agree. I just feel like there is no like, I don't know, quality in terms of like the YouTube format. Like if I had the money to pay for an editor to like edit these videos and like make it YouTubeable, I would do it in a heartbeat. But like this is just like raw footage of like
Found footage
about wine. There's no graphics. I can barely pronounce things properly.
There's no theme song yet.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's funny. Okay. I'm going to start the show. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Wine Coach at Home. Yes. Sorry. Andrew just says he could watch it at double speed. I mean, that would be something.
You get through so many more wine coaches that way.
People just have this, you speak so much slower in real life. I'm like, oh, that's because you watch me at double speed. Anyway, welcome to Beaujolais Beaujolais edition of Wine Coach. This is number 29. I was looking it over today. It's crazy how many wine coaches I've done in 2021. And I'm really excited. This Beaujolais is super classic, and it is a region and a wine that we think we know, we think we understand, we often overlook. It does always play second fiddle to like the greater heights of Burgundy, Pinot Noir, but there is a place in it, and it's not. I think it has a completely valid place in the world of wine. And I'm excited to taste these 5 Beaujolais. But I never do this alone. Today I have my good friend, ex-colleague Chelsea Lawrence is here. Hello, Chelsea. How are you today? Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Are you excited to taste some Beaujolais?
When you say number 29, are you counting the wine coaches that you did in person?
No. This is virtual from January 1st when we did Pinot Noir of the first week of January.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I hate to say this, but like I'm so glad. I can't believe I left it this long to have you on. It's such a treat to have you.
Well, I've done Wine Coach with you before in person, though, is the thing.
Oh yeah, we did too. Women in Wine, didn't we?
Yeah, which was probably one of the first ones.
And that wine rep gave us which one? No, what did we have? That was a fun one though.
We did Veuve for the Willow Clicquot. We did Dan Sperling's. The Canary Island Yellow Label. What is it? Yep.
Envenate. Oh, that's a good one. We're gonna do another Envenate one. I pre-ordered their next shipment and picked 6 wines that we can like taste through all of the like their classic from different regions, not just the one. But I'm excited. It's gonna be fun. Envenate is super great.
Yeah.
You're an OG co-host. I mean, you were literally the only. I think I've very rarely co-hosted in person. I think you were the only one.
Well, very many have co-hosted with you in person now.
Well, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're back. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Where can people find you? What do you do in your day job? I think that's.
So I'm the operations manager for Otto's Food Group, which includes Otto's Beer Hall that I'm actually in right now, Otto's Berlin Donor in Kensington, and then Grape Crush at Dundas and Ossington, our little wine shop.
So I hope, I'm sure plenty of people have been there. So if you haven't, go. If you don't, you're silly. Food is good. Sausages are good. Okay, so Beaujolais. This is a I always kind of laugh to myself when we talk about Beaujolais because there's a lot of Burgund wines, these marketing boards that talk about Burgundy and they talk about Chablis and all the wines we've been tasting over the last few months, like great Chardonnay, you know, Aligote even is in the conversation. But they always forget, they purposely exclude Beaujolais from their maps, from their conversations, their information, which is silly because Beaujolais is technically a part of Burgundy. It is, has a very kind of interesting history, but it's one of those, I always laugh. I'm like, but what about Beaujolais? Like, why do you not talk about Beaujolais?
It's the Jan Brady in France.
Actually a very good. Actually a very good analogy. Yeah, it is, and it's kind of like it's a. I think we're moving through like. I think a lot of people don't remember the time when Beaujolais was like cheap and cheerful and like really in this, in the 70s and 80s where it was just like Beaujolais Nouveau, like glue, cheap and cheerful. It didn't really taste like wine. It kind of tasted like banana juice, and it was really strange. And I remember my first like forays into Beaujolais were serious Beaujolais, like where they were cru Beaujolais, and that was kind of what you taught, and you were, the wines that were on wine lists. And I mean, almost 20 years later, those same wines are still there. Like I don't we but that reputation has just hung on. And especially in like the people who really make those decisions, they still think Beaujolais isn't serious. It isn't worthy of like talking about and considering as like fine wine. But that's and I'm excited to taste all of these beautiful wines.
Yeah.
So, if people don't know, Beaujolais is Gamay, and Gamay also has like a lot of local, in Niagara in Ontario, is like a pretty important grape. It is very suited to our climate, and there is we make some amazing Gamay, but we don't often talk about Gamay the way we often talk about Chardonnay or Pinot Noir or Riesling. But it's there. I don't know. I can't remember a grape like actually I like Leaning Post Gamay. They make a really nice Gamay. It kind of drinks lighter. It's not super jammy. It's a bit more like elegant, a bit more refined, but it's a super fun wine. I mean, I hope if people have favorites, local Gamay, please put it in the chat so I can know.
There's some good ones out in the county. The Grange always has a Gamay, and theirs are really nice. I think like a little bit on the earthier side, maybe just as their winemaking technique in general. But even the Trainer one is like crushable, like so crushable. Yeah. A little bit chilled is like the perfect. But I think in Ontario, especially, like Beaujolais is maybe overlooked because we often do end up with an Ontario Gamay on the list. And rather than doubling up, they just would go with the local. But
I agree.
People don't really talk about it, I would say. Like you only ever hear people talk about it in relation to like turkey dinner. Strangely.
Yeah. Turkey dinner. I love that. And it is one of those things where I don't drink enough Beaujolais, but when I do, I'm like, oh, this is like, I often like in my head think, oh, I'm going to a restaurant. I'm not going to buy a bottle of Beaujolais at a restaurant. I'm going to like just buy it to drink at home. But when I have Beaujolais, I'm like, this is pretty great wine. I'm super excited. So, and I always find revisiting these wine regions, like we did Aligote last week, just like changes my brain. I'm like, oh, I forget how exciting these wines are. And there is a reason, like historically in the 90s, Kermit Lynch, a very famous American wine merchant, kind of coined this term, like gang of four, of these four winemakers in Beaujolais who inspired by natural winemaking, created a more natural style of Beaujolais. And this is kind of the moment where Beaujolais kind of changed in everyone's minds. from going from this easy drinking Beaujolais Nouveau style to this more serious natural style of wine. You know, we talk about natural winemakers. We think about Loire Valley, we think about Nicolas Joly, we think about these great winemakers, and we often again overlook Beaujolais and like the significance. Like back in the 90s, this was the original natural wine. This was low intervention, organic, biodynamic practices, low sulfur, doing as little as possible to make as beautiful wine. And it's going to show in the glass. We have one of the last wine is from the Gang of Four. So the Gang of Four are Marcel Lapierre, Jean something Fouillard, Bevernet, and Guy Breton. So we've got one of them, which is kind of fun. And we'll see, there's a little gamut. But let's just drink some wine because I could talk, there's so many facts and fun things to talk about Beaujolais. Okay, first one, 2017, Domaine Sancerre Moulin à Vent. So all the wines we're tasting today are all from different crus of Beaujolais. So people who don't understand or know what a cru is, these are like 5 villages that kind of create some of the best, I consider the best boat for making Beaujolais. I have a little map that I'm going to share. As you can see, there is 10 crus: Saint-Amand, Julianas, Chenas, Moulin à Vent, Fleury, Cherubs, Morgon, Régny, Brouilly, and Côte de Brouilly. And they kind of are considered, you know, the top tier of Beaujolais. And at the prices you buy them for, I don't really see why not going for a cru Beaujolais cru is like, I mean, you can get good Beaujolais cru for $30 a bottle. So, you know, go crazy. This
Especially
is
to Burgundy prices too, right?
100%. And there is a lot of influences. There's a lot of Burgundy producers. Philippe Paquelet is one of them, who's like from the Beaujolais region, and he makes beautiful Beaujolais. There are Louis Jadot own a Beaujolais domain called Chateau de Jacques, and they make beautiful Beaujolais. So there's lots of influences. Have a taste, Chelsea, and tell me what you think of this wine.
The color on it's really nice. It's like not quite clear, but not cloudy also.
Moulin à Vent, I'll put the wine in the chat right now. Moulin à Vent is considered the most like structured and the biggest of the Beaujolais crus. It is like the soils create these really structured, really powerful Beaujolais. So I'm curious if you sort of get that.
Yeah, I definitely get the structure there. I mean, the thing that's wrong with my palate is that I'm quite sensitive to tannins, so I'm definitely getting a lot of that structure in this. But it's like all the red fruit in the world, with like a really nice florality as well. A little bit of like cocoa or like chocolate, I guess.
Yeah.
But you could drink this with so many things. Like,
yeah. This is a more low intervention style, so you're getting a little funk, a bit of wild yeast. They use barrel aged. They use a portion in concrete and a portion in neutral oak. So you're getting a little bit more rounder sort of flavor. I think Moulin à Vent can be a little jagged sometimes. And this is a very middle of the road kind of style. It's not completely like natural, as we will get to in some of the in wine number 4, but it is like an easy drinking, middle of the road. If you think of Beaujolais as a spectrum, we see this like Burgundian style where they use new oak, they try to make it as taste like Pinot Noir as much as possible. So like the other side, which are like completely natural, they literally probably just like step on the grapes and just walk away. There's like sweep it into a bottle about 3 months later, which, you know, we make a joke, but like sometimes that's kind of how it goes. But this is definitely middle of the road and very accessible.
Like a gateway natural wine. Like if you had someone curious about what natural wine's all about and what that funkiness that people are talking about, this is a good way to demonstrate it without like knocking them over with it, if you will.
Yeah, and it's 2017, so it's got a bit of age on it as well. Like you can start to get that oxidative kind of flavors, like drying out. The fruit's a little raisinated, a little dried out, which I think is really fun. And, you know, again, you know, one of the big things we talk about with Beaujolais is that it is not, you know, it's not really age worthy. And that's a big thing about diminishing wines and like diminishing regions. When they start saying that the wine isn't age worthy, it's kind of a really, it like, it reduces the like its seriousness, and like a serious wine is always age worthy. And like this is a really good point to say that, like, you know, you don't necessarily like these wines, while traditionally not, you know, um, when traditionally not, you know, age worthy, and a lot of Beaujolais, most of Beaujolais isn't. It's meant to be drunk within a year, but there are winemakers who can make beautiful wine out of Gamay, and there's a reason why this is classic. And you know, and I think wine number one, we will, you know, wine number one is about justifying the validity of Beaujolais as a valid like style of wine, and that you should drink it, and then we'll slowly, as we drink the other four, we'll talk about how delicious it is at any time.
You also need something to be drinking while you're waiting on all of your, you know, Bordeaux's to come into themselves and stuff. Like you can't always buy wines that are just to be put away. You've got to have something to drink now or next year or in 2 years. There's a time and place for everything. And I think, you know, Beaujolais just has a bad reputation or isn't given the seriousness that it deserves. I think it's super.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a lot of natural wine, and there's a lot of red wine made in a really crunchy kind of high acid style that's supposed to be like just chewy and like it's not overly developed, it's not super serious. And I think that's what we think Beaujolais is. But when you taste it, you see there is a mid palate, there is depth, there's this spice, this earthiness that comes with it, and this beautiful long finish. Like we're thinking about, you know, cheap and cheerful like Jura Pulsard or Trousseau or something. You know, it's light, it's kind of crunchy, and it's easy drinking. You know, this isn't that wine. Like, but in our heads, we often think of it in the same camp because this was the original like easy drinking wine. But you know, I don't know, I think tastes have changed, and this is great, and the prices are still great. I think this is. I just got to look it up. I think it's like $45. This is $60. Well, it's as expected. But it's beautiful. I really like this one.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of power there. There's like the acidity's there, the acids there. It's like it's everything. You know, there's this myth that Gamay is perhaps not. There's not a lot of tannins in Gamay, but that's not really. I mean, it is lower in tannins than other red wines, but they're still there. There's still things holding up this wine, and it's not just acid. So it's super delicious.
Well, especially when you start talking about chilling reds, because so often when we're talking, you know, in traditional settings, reds wouldn't be chilled. But when you start to put a little bit of, you know, cooling them down a little bit, they can drink like you would drink a white wine, and they can pair like you would drink a white wine. It doesn't always have to be red meat. Doesn't always have to be heavy.
Yeah, Beaujolais was. I remember being like 23 and working in a restaurant, and the song was like I read an article that like you can, you know, cool down. You can cool, like you can chill red, and I was like, what? This was the first, like when I was a baby boy. This was like the first time someone had said you can drink red wine cold. And like mine isn't really cold, but I mean, I took it out of the fridge maybe less than an hour ago. But That's another good point about Beaujolais we don't talk about. Is that you chill that down and it's a beautiful summer wine.
Yeah. Well, especially now that we're into like cherry, raspberry, blueberry season, like I'm putting those fruits in everything that I eat, like sweet and savory, you know? So this wine would, I mean, probably any of these wines would go so well with that, like any of those sorts of dishes, right? And that's against, you know, the initial things that we were probably taught about wine as, you know, whether it was teenagers or young adults sort of thing, going to fancy restaurants for the first time.
I mean, if I was a teenager learning about Beaujolais, my life would have been a very different. I'd have been so fancy. Like I can just imagine it in like rural Australia, like my parents ordering a bottle of Beaujolais in like the
I mean,
early 90s. I love that. And that vision is just great. Me just sipping on a glass when I'm like 17 Beaujolais.
I remember when I lived in Jasper, I got invited to Thanksgiving dinner, and it was like probably the first adult, like proper adult party, like dinner party I'd ever been to. And I ended up stumbling into a wine shop and like being like, help me, like I don't know what I'm doing. I walked out with Beaujolais that day and like forever a fan. But like that's
Oh,
like one of those moments, you know?
and that's a good sign of the versatility. Like you can't you if you're going to a dinner party, I don't think you could go wrong with Beaujolais unless I don't think even if it was like someone who was like a big Burgundy head and I was like, no, I'm just going to bring Beaujolais because sometimes you don't want to engage in that level of like hysteria over Burgundy and like finding a great bottle of Pinot Noir of a producer that you can share with someone who's fancy and you're like, nah, Beaujolais is my flex because there's a beauty to that.
I mean, there's always going to be someone who splashes out, whether it's like a nice bottle of wine, a nice pair of shoes, a nice car, like whatever it is. But I'm always impressed by the people who understand the value of what they're buying. And for me, like Beaujolais represents great value compared to so much of what we get here in Canada from France and what we're taught to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it should 100%. And yeah, Beaujolais is my flex. I think that's a good point. I mean, I mean, I love a wine meme, but like gets overplayed sometimes, especially in my Google ads. Oh, so many wine memes. Okay, wine number two. So this is a very different piece of a very different name. This is Clos de Royette Fleury. So this is a very iconic bottle. I don't have the bottle. I don't know why. I was in some kind of fugue state yesterday and didn't bring the bottles home with me. But this is a very iconic yellow label Fleury. I'll just share it on the screen. I love this one. This is one of the like. This is such a beautiful Beaujolais. I hope we'll taste. I mean, we can all taste it now. Chelsea, what do you think about this one?
I'd say it's a little bit greener. There's a lot more like herbaceous. There's more herbaceousness to this one,
Yeah, absolutely.
and almost
This is a
like black licorice too. Like there's something anisey.
yeah. This is a really iconic, um, a really iconic, really iconic bottle. So really, this like canary yellow with this picture of a horse on it. So Clos de Royette is the name of the wine. It's not necessarily it's not the name of the producer, but essentially Clos de la Royette is kind of what you could just consider it as. So the little backstory behind this horse. So in 1936, this wine was associated with Moulin-Avant, so the village that this wine is from, the first wine was from. And Moulin-Avant is really considered more highly in the world of Beaujolais. But what they did, they created the Fleury village, which strangely enough, well, unfortunately for them, Clos de Royette fell into the boundary of Fleury rather than Melon Avant. And they were very, very upset. So the winemaker doesn't put Fleury on the label, except in the really smallest writing, and instead made sure this horse was a racehorse or something, front and center. So this is a very iconic wine, and I think in a wine shop, or I mean, you'll never find this at LCBO. Who we're kidding. But if you're traveling, if you're in another wine shop, you see this canary yellow, you will find this wine, and it is a very beautiful, age-worthy. I've had some old ones of these. This is definitely one of my aha kind of Beaujolais. It's just magical. And when we talk about Fleury, it's hard to understand, how to pull the villages apart, how to pull these different crews apart. Fleury, they say, tends to have a more floral nose to it. So this lavender and rose kind of character. I don't know whether that's the case. We did a Beaujolais tasting where we did 9 crews maybe 2 years ago at Peter Pan, and we lined up 9 crews, and all the wines were very different, but it was more of the winemaking, I think, that kind of stood out rather than the terroir of these different villages. But I love this wine. A bit more traditional, a little bit more on the old school side, so like Burgundian style, a little bit of new oak, a little bit of oak influence on this wine. Not as fruity, a little bit more savory. I think you're right with that greenness.
Yeah.
And much more mineral. Like there's so much more minerality to this, like stoniness, but also earthiness, which I think is super fun. I could drink a lot of this. I always forget how delicious this wine is.
There's a really wet gravel kind of aspect to it, which to me makes me want food. I want some fatty kind of meat, or a rich sauce on something sort of thing. It's crazy because those two vineyards are not that far apart. I mean, that map looks big, but that's not a very big region at all. Okay. It's completely different.
And the other thing we often talk about the Burgundian influence of Beaujolais, so Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, because it is a part of Burgundy. But what some people don't, what we're not often told is that it is mere kilometers away from the Northern Rhone. So Syrah and Syrah winemaking and the flavors and the style, the evocativeness of Syrah also influences Beaujolais a lot as well. And you can sort of begin to taste this. If you taste this, you go, if you had to decide whether this was from Burgundy or from the Northern Rhone, I'm not probably sure where I would fall on that, because it does have this smoky kind of charm. It's not super tannic, which is Syrah isn't super tannic either. Syrah is kind of high acid, black fruit, intensity. And this kind of has that. And I kind of I often forget, and it's sometimes more useful in my mind to think of Beaujolais as a offshoot of the Northern Rhone rather than an offshoot of Burgundy.
Well, and I think too, when we talk about cool climate regions, Burgundy is definitely one of the ones that would come to mind. But being Canadian and living in Canada yourself really taints what cool climate means, because I mean, I've been to Beaujolais and Northern Rhone, and it was days as hot and drier than this. And that's what their whole summer would have been like. But when we think about cool climate, I mean, even on the hottest day, Niagara or Prince Edward County are going to be cooler than the weather we're experiencing here today in Toronto. So we think really cool when we think of Burgundy, but in reality, we are always going to be colder than the coolest climate. It just is that way, just the nature of the geography.
Yeah, 100%.
But yeah, that dry heat that exists in the Northern Rhone is absolutely what the grapes in Beaujolais would also be experiencing. And most of Burgundy probably too, I guess, just depends on where the winds are going.
We sell wine number 2 for $47, so it's just under $50. This is also, again, if you have access to it or you buy it, you know, this is a wine that I would happily lay down for 5 to 10 years, and it would just think it could only get better with age. And you'll see it on Instagram a lot. Again, it's a very iconic label. So if you follow wine Instagram things, influencers, I'm gonna say, but most wine influencers just try to sell you like Colombian Malbec or something that because they're getting paid thousands of dollars.
I've seen a lot of Stoneleigh Chardonnay lately or Sauvignon Blanc.
I know it's
top quality.
It's a difficult landscape to navigate because I don't begrudge them for earning coin through posting pictures of wine and talking about a very physical, a very visceral experience where, you want people to understand what you're tasting and you have to say it in letters and a picture. But I mean, just because someone who has a lot of followers tells you that, Stoneleigh Chardonnay is good, doesn't necessarily mean that it is good. It just means that they're getting paid a lot of money to do so. I mean, if I got paid
not just
a few $1,000s to post on, I would consider it. I mean, no.
I mean, no one would pay me that kind of money to post anything.
No one's going to pay that. I have this disclaimer on my tickets. I don't know if anyone's ever noticed this, but it is to say, Wine Coach is free of promotional materials. All of our wines we pay for 100%, even though we have a winemaker visit on screen with us, or the wine reps are on the call. I don't get any free nothing for anything, and I think that's an important conversation somms have to have, is to go, as we start to become influential and people start paying us money to do that, I don't ever want people to worry that I'm saying something because I'm getting paid to do so, or because I'm getting compensated to do so, whether with money or with product or whatever.
I mean, just the entire alcohol industry too, right? I mean, you don't necessarily have to get paid to do something in order to reap the benefits of a transaction. There's a lot of free product floating around and trips here and there and everywhere. So
yeah.
I guess you just never know.
If I'm not getting booked to go on 29 free trips next year for all the wine coaches that I've done, well, I'm going to be real mad. That's my only end goal. I just want.
As soon as COVID's over, you'll get to go everywhere. I'm sure they're just waiting for the restrictions to lift.
That email is just in their draft section. They're like, can we send it? Can we send it?
They were just waiting for you to get your second shot. I'm sure next week.
Sorry, everyone, I have my second shot. I'm double vaccinated. Send me where you want. I'm talking to you.
I'm ready. World, I'm ready.
Yeah. Anyway, I love this wine. And I just can't get Syrah out of my head. This is super delicious. But we've got 25 minutes left and we've got 3 wines to drink. So let's get drinking. Thankfully, I chose someone who could handle drinking 5 glasses of wine in an hour, just like me. Tried and true. So Chateau Thiven, Côte de Brouilly, wine number 3. So Chateau Thiven, considered one of the oldest winemakers in Beaujolais, and kind of one of the most historical and oldest, most well-respected. And Côte de Brouilly is, if we go back to that little map, if I have the ability to both talk and hold a conversation, nope, I don't, is this extinct volcano that sits at the base of the Beaujolais region. So Côte de Brouilly is this beautiful, really cool, fun, very highly regarded, because it is a hill. And as we know in Burgundy, slope is really important. And so Brouilly is this really large region, and the Côte de Brouilly is the jam inside the donut, the jelly inside the And Chateau Steven is it's really, really cool, old school producer. I was on their website today. They mentioned the use of putting there's a little bit of Chardonnay in this wine, and I don't know whether that's true or not. It's a very interesting thing.
What an interesting thing to admit to on the internet.
Yeah, on their website, which is a really cool website, yeah, they mentioned small amounts of Chardonnay, and I was like, interesting. I like this one.
This is a lot less structured. Like the tannins are a lot less piercing. And I would say this is a more like romantic or like flamboyant kind of wine. Like it's not as rigid.
Yeah, so I looked up a website to sort of figure out how to like explain the 10 crus and like how they differ from them. So, you know, volcanic soil is a big part of this. So you're getting that kind of like tension and that like activity and that sort of texture on the wines. Yeah, they tend to be compared to the brewy wines rather than wines in general. And they do say that these are a little bit more serious, a little bit more age-worthy than the brewy, which are a little flatter landscape, tend to be a little juicier, tend to be a little, you know, drinkable, more drinkable, less citrus. But I like this wine. This is very like acidic, very fresh, obviously probably because of maybe slightly higher in elevation, and you're getting a little bit more acidity. But it's super fun.
Yeah.
And light, and very light in color. Like I had a Burgundy last night for dinner, and it was like so dark in color. And this
Was
idea
it for
sometimes
dinner
that well, after dinner. But this idea is sometimes that you have that like Pinot Noir is light in color, and other wines, you know, Beaujolais isn't. You just look at these wines and you sort of go, color isn't necessarily everything. This is kind of fun. I like this one a lot. Definitely much more serious. Definitely, I think probably really good, better with food. I think maybe it's got that acidity to cut through sort of these rich, beautiful, rich Burgundian dishes. Goes good with your pistachio nuts, maybe. I don't know that you got from Rexall. But that's
I got from Rexall. I think that one's my favorite so far, to be honest.
Oh,
but
really?
It's just more. I think it might just be that it's so hot out right now, and that one is a bit easier drinking.
I think this also benefited a lot from being open and put in a pouch on Friday. I feel like the oxygen has really opened this wine up, and otherwise I think it would feel very dense and a little too tightly packed.
Yeah.
But there's like this nuttiness going on with it. This like almondy kind of thing, which I think is really great. And again, this like, it's not super earthy and super, it's a little bit more like, it's not, if you still have like maybe wine number one or wine number two, you're getting these Beaujolais that kind of sink into the earth and kind of have this really grounded approach. And then this Côte de Bruy tends to have, it's a little bit lighter, a little bit more, like you said, easier drinking and a little less earthy and a little less heavy. It sort of leans on this lighter kind of more, I think, and maybe because of the volcanic soils, which is a really interesting conversation that maybe we could explore in a future wine coach, volcanic wines. Maybe get the master of volcanic wines, John Szabo, on the call. That's never going to happen, but you know. We are lucky if you're interested in what volcanic wines are and you've never heard of this term. Essentially, it's soils that have been created and derived from volcanic eruptions. There's usually a volcano somewhere nearby. Not necessarily always the case. Mount Etna in Sicily, classic volcanic soils. can't think of anything else off the top.
Canary Islands are volcanic, right?
Canary Islands, absolutely, absolutely. Hungary has some very ancient volcanic soils.
Greece.
Greece, obviously, Santorini, very classic volcanic soil. But we also have like one of the most preeminent experts based in this city, John Szabo. He's a master sommelier, Canada's first master sommelier. But he literally wrote the book on volcanic soils and volcanic wines. So if it's something that you're interested in, buy his book, buy some cool volcanic wines. I really love volcanic wines. Some exhibit like literally smoky kind of acrid kind of volcanicness, fieriness, but some have a bit more lighter touch like this one.
Volcanic wines are definitely made for barbecue, so 'tis the season, I think.
Yeah, volcanic tasting. That would be fun. Okay, I've got to think of some for the next 4-6 weeks. Okay, well, okay, we're going to wine number 4, and this is where we hit we go down the natural winemaking road. I don't know if you can smell it. There's a little bit of VA on this wine. Volatile acidity. Volatile acidity. I mean, I very rarely talk about natural wines because it's very hard to show natural wines. They tend to don't last as well as they should, as other wines do in pouches. And so I tend not to I tend not to share a lot of natural wines because I know that they're not going to show as well as they can and they should. But I really wanted to share this wine. Georges Decombe. This is Renier, is the crew. This is the newest village, and it is kind of fun. I was talking earlier about the Gang of Four, these four natural winemakers in the 90s that kind of put Beaujolais on the map. Decombe is kind of considered the 5th member, but upon closer inspection, there is 6. I think there's like 6 other winemakers who are considered the 5th winemaker of this Gang of Four. Anyway, needless to say, these wines are more natural in style. I mean, you can kind of get that right on the nose. So volatile acidity is this kind of like, it just comes with natural winemaking, and it has this kind of like salt, vinegary, kind of ketchupy kind of smell. It adds a layer of complexity. It's not a fault. It can be a fault if it's in abundance, but it is just a way of adding another layer of complexity. You know, wine is about adding layers in different ways, be it oak, be it indigenous yeast, whole cluster, natural winemaking, and this is kind of what this does. Chelsea, what's your impressions of this wine?
I mean, I'm getting a lot of kind of like darker, richer notes, I would say, especially compared to the last one. I think that the fact that you package these up on Friday has probably done a lot of work on making this a little bit more approachable.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's heavier and richer and darker than the third wine for sure.
Yeah, this is kind of like a little bit more. Renier is kind of a home to a little bit more funkier. Beaujolais tends to be a bit more spicier than others, and I get that spicy kind of note. Yeah, this is a very funky wine. It is right on the edge of what I want to share with people. Like, this drinks really well. It's just you're seeing sort of like a different side of natural wine. Like, you're getting that oxidative kind of nutty kind of thing on the back palate, which I think is super fun. But I really like these wines. The Decombe wines aren't super accessible here. If you're in Quebec and Montreal, you'll definitely see a ton of them. But these are really iconic natural style wines, and I think these are really special. And Beaujolais does natural wine probably easier and better than a lot of other regions around the world. I love smelling this.
Yeah. I'm kind of mesmerized, to be perfectly honest.
And like we talk about like the acidity and like, but it's there's acidity, like we talk about the funkiness of it, but like remove what we're smelling, but focus on how much we're smelling. There's a lot. It's a very intensely aromatic wine, much more aromatic than like 2 and 3 were. And I kind of like that. I like that I'm getting a real kick in the face on the nose, essentially, with a lot of flavors. And pull this apart a little, I think you get a really nice wine.
I think in just comparing back with what we've tasted today, compared to 1 and 2, where it was maybe a little bit earthy in the same way that like a Pinot Noir would be earthy, like a barnyard kind of mushroomy. This is a little bit more like leather to me, like kind of like a different end of the spectrum almost of that same kind of flavor. But I will say that I think this one's quite a bit more complex. Like I'm having a really hard time kind of like pulling out like exactly what it is that I'm tasting. And that to me is just like more complex winemaking or, aging in a different way, because all of those layers can make it a little bit harder to pull out exactly what it is and to relate what it is you're tasting to what's actually happened in the winemaking process or growing process.
Yeah. This is $55 in the store. I think I've got like another 7, 8 bottles of this left. I actually originally wanted to pour his brewy with his old vine brew, which is kind of one of his like top wines, but I only had 2 bottles left, and I wouldn't have enough to pour for everyone. So I chose the Rainier, which is his more accessible, wine at $55, which is kind of a lot, but at the same time, this is second tier, kind of like second tier Beaujolais, and 55 is, I think, a pretty good price. Top tier Beaujolais, where we go to like La Pierre and Pouliard, where you're talking about $70 to $80 a bottle, which I think is kind of. I like this one a lot. It's kind of growing on me. It's so much more natural style than the other 3 that it kind of snuck up on me, and I was like, whoa, bang. It is fun.
I think that could do with some aging too. Like if you wanted to buy a couple and chuck a few to the side and see where they got in a year or 3, because both the acidity and the tannins are playing really interestingly together, and that's only going to become cooler with time, I think.
Yeah, and like I just have this very evocative kind of imagery of like sitting on a patio at like Union or something, and like just having a beautiful like whatever I order, and like this is a perfect wine to go with it. Like it has so much going on, but it also has this kind of bistro kind of like casualness to it as well. I don't have to let it open up for like 4 hours, or I don't have to worry about like necessarily worry too much about like the anxiety of picking a wine. Like I could buy this any day and be super happy because I'm getting both something that has a lot of complexity, has a level of like beauty to it, but also suits, I don't know, more restaurant dining more than I think some other wines can.
A diamond in the rough for sure.
Yeah, you can drink it within an hour and you not feel like you're being cheated or rushed.
Well, and I feel like it's a Beaujolais that you could sneak in to an evening tasting wine with friends in a backyard and convert the Beaujolais haters just by not telling them what it is,
I'm gonna get wine bags. I'm gonna get wine bags that it's gonna be labeled Sneaky Beaujolais, and then you just put it in there and you're like.
That is the wine number 4 is the Sneaky Beaujolais.
It's the sneakiest of the Beaujolais, absolutely. And look, this is, there's a lot of, Grape Crush, the wine store that you run, like, sells a lot of natural wine. Like this is very much, if your audience is natural wines and you love natural wines, like this is a really great natural wine that has that element of seriousness, age-worthiness, like, it helps bridge that gap between natural wine lovers and people who natural wine haters, essentially. And I don't think you could pour this for anyone, especially any winemaker, and they'd be super happy to drink this, regardless of whether they make natural wine or not.
Well, I'm always looking for the natural wines that are tame enough, maybe is the word I'm going to use, that I could give it to my dad or my grandpa and have them not be like, this is a bad wine, like this wine is off. And this wine, I think just due to the sheer complexity of the structure and the flavors, would be the one that could sneak in there and they wouldn't even know.
Yeah, 100%. This is fun. Oh, again, if someone poured me a random glass of Beaujolais and said, what village is this from? I wouldn't be able, like, I've drunk a lot of different villages of crews of Beaujolais and I still can't pick it apart, but my God, I enjoy drinking it. This has been super great. Okay, wine number 5. So I picked this one, the Guy Breton Morgon. I mean, Morgon is kind of has this like hallowed place, mainly because the like, you know, when you talk about the great Beaujolais producers, you think about Fouillard, you think about La Pierre, and this is where they kind of pitched their tent in Morgon, the village of Morgon. I tasted this maybe a few weeks ago. It was so delicious, and I'm really excited to share it with everyone.
It's got a really different note on it than all of the other ones, I would say. It's almost like jasmine or green tea right on the nose.
Yeah, that green tea, that's a really good note.
Which is super interesting because, like, obviously they're not growing jasmine or green tea anywhere near here.
But it has this like slight hint of vanilla, a bit of that jasmine is such a good note. It's like this very aromatic, very fine floral note. Mm. Oh yeah.
That one's super different than the other ones.
So, like I said, Gang of Four. So in the 90s, they kind of hit their prominence around the world, especially in America, by being imported by this wine merchant called Kermit Lynch. If you've never heard of this person before, they wrote a really cool book about adventures on the wine path, and it talks about a white guy walking around France and meeting really cool winemakers, and in this discovery of really cool wine that he's never heard of before. Anyway, but he's really famous for bringing this level of wine to America in the 90s, and I can sort of see that. This is pretty great wine. This is top tier kind of level of Beaujolais. Guy Breton tends to be the lighter of all the four, where La Pierre and Fouillard kind of play with power and intensity a lot. Breton and Thevenet is kind of right in the middle, but Breton tends to like play with ethereal, kind of subtle, elegant kind of notes, lighter kind of tones, very lighter in color. I think this is a delicious wine.
Yeah.
Very smooth, very elegant, very easy drinking. In the way that I don't even think Pinot Noir or Syrah has this like ability to just like beautifully just like to be super visceral, go down past your tongue and go down your throat with like barely a whisper. I kind of like that.
Is this 100% Gamay?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Why? What is I tell me, what did you think was in there?
I'm just like, I don't know. I feel stupid saying this out loud, but I feel like there's like some, like lemon meringue pie or something in there, and I don't understand where it's coming from.
Okay, so to refer back to my article that I've been using to like talk about define the different crews. Morgon, fuller bodied, serious crew. granite centric. Yeah, it just talks about theory. Like, you know, you talk about Morgon, we talk about seriousness, tannic, intense, powerful wines. This is a Morgon wine. This is one of the greatest Morgon producers, winemakers in Beaujolais. This doesn't drink powerful and tannic in the way I think people associate power, and like it isn't. This isn't like, you know.
I think there is also something to be said, though, that the generalized descriptions that we're going to get about the different crus in Beaujolais, when you have a natural winemaker, you can kind of throw those out the window for them, like for the most part, because
they're
gonna do things that aren't the typical, especially like mass produced or, you know, very classic examples of any of these. I don't know which one I like best out of the 5. I'm now very conflicted.
Waiting for. Oh, you're back. Welcome back. Or I'm back. I'm not sure. We all froze.
I was just saying that I'm not sure which one's my favorite out of the 5 now, to be perfectly honest.
That's a good question. I think the Clos de Royette for me, in terms of age worthiness, I think having a few of these in my cellar, checking back in 5-10 years, I think I'm going to be the most excited by this like evolution of what it can do, and I'm so excited for that journey.
Yeah.
The Steven, I just see the history. I can feel the history and taste the history of this region, and that's very evocative for me. It is so fresh. It is such a great expression, and it kind of drinks. It reminds me of like Burgundy, like Pinot Noir, just more than the others. And then the Breton, just as its ability to like, you know, we talk about Morgon as like this powerful and like structured wine, but I also think it's like, it's not necessarily, it's the capacity to be complex and elegant and be this beautiful, iconic wine that you can share that wows people. You know, I think we associate like the capacity with wine, like we think power and structure is everything in red wine. That's why Barolos and Napa and Bordeaux, like these are these beautiful, powerful wines, but it's not necessarily. That's one aspect of like a beautiful, complex, perfect wine. But I think, you know, this is expressing a different side of that is equally is a finesse of like just subtlety. And I just find that evocative and beautiful. Christian says 2 and 5. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good note. I mean, I love 2 and 5. What was your favorite, Chelsea?
I think I want to drink number 3 today, just because it's the lighter, I think, of our flight tonight. And I just wanted a little bit chilled, and I just want to be able to like nibble outside on a balcony or patio right now, drinking that all night. I love that number 4 is sneaky. Like, I love a good sneaky wine. I think this is probably the most versatile of what we tasted tonight, which is always something I'm looking for when I'm purchasing wine. Because you never know, like where you're going or who you're going to end up with. And it's nice just to be able to reach into your cellar and know that you've got like a one size fits all. And I think this is what number 4 ends up being. But number 5 is the one that I'm most captivated by. I think it's the most interesting and unique wine of the flight. And it's going to like keep me guessing probably for weeks, you know?
What would be your takeaway? Like, what's your piece of advice for our audience to like navigate Beaujolais? Because I don't think I have a clearer picture. I think I have a better, I've tasted some more and I have a better sort of knowledge and background of Beaujolais, but I don't necessarily have a better, clearer understanding. But like, I'm curious as to like, how do you, like, what's your advice you would give people?
I would say open mind because Beaujolais is not the banana bubblegum grape juice of Beaujolais Nouveau. Like that's a very separate thing. And I think, I mean, just based on this flight alone, like I think there's like an element of fun to it as well. So um, trying an interesting pairing, pairing an unusual thing. I mean, there's like so many flavors that are very atypical, I guess, when you're talking about tasting a low tannin, low body kind of red. Um, so yeah, open mind, I think, and being playful with it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's kind of where my advice is as well, is that like, I think winemaking definitely defines this region more than terroir and more than like, I think I personally think the Cru Beaujolais, I think that's worth your time. Like Beaujolais Village, Beaujolais Nouveau, you know, it has a time and a place. If you're wanting to have something that's like excites you, stick with the cruise. So you'll know it pretty clear. It'll say Beaujolais and I'll have it. There's 10 of them. You don't have to remember them. I do. It was, I think, an exam question, but I think from there, once you stick with the Beaujolais cruise, you can kind of explore that spectrum. And I don't think you're necessarily all, like, I don't think focusing just on the cruise and going, oh, I only drink Morgon because that's the best. Like, no, you can have very like I could have poured 5 different Morgons and we could have had completely different experiences. But I think focusing on winemakers that you really like and like exploring that and like having a little bit of what wine, recall to go, oh, I really like that producer. I think you're going to get a really consistent product and a really consistent experience. And like, you will see a lot of people, the institutions of wine, the marketing boards, the authorities, whatever they call themselves, really discount Beaujolais across the board. And that's a historical kind of, vestige of like prejudice against Beaujolais and Gamay as a grape. But, I don't think that it really doesn't like much. I don't think you could have, we could do a Chianti Classico tasting of 5 Chianti Classicos, have the same, relatively same experience and have the same conversation and have the same impressions of the wine and like pay 3 times the amount of money to have that experience. And like the fact that we can have a $40 lineup of Beaujolais it's silly even now. And that's not because of its popularity, it's because people hundreds of years ago decided that Gamay isn't as good as Pinot Noir and they should be punished because of that. So,
well, and I think the fact that like any of us are here tasting 5 Beaujolais back to back shows like a certain open-mindedness or like willingness to like take those preconceived notions and put them aside and just evaluate what's in our glass and what's in front of us right now. And leaning into that is how I would approach tasting any Beaujolais moving forward. Yeah. And to be honest, like not just Beaujolais, but like any of those grapes that are, that like a 65-year-old white man who's in a wine club would scoff at, like those are the wines that I would like to be drinking,
Well, I don't why people aren't like that. I don't know anyone like that.
Like the wines that like haven't been given the chance, like they represent great value, which like is a huge thing for me. Like I don't spend a lot of money on really expensive bottles of wine because I know that for every $150 bottle of wine, there's a $50 bottle of wine that's just as good that I can get 3 of for the price of 1. So I'm like so cheap when it comes to wine. Always. Yeah. So yeah, I want to taste what the wine clubs won't bring in because no one will touch it. And I want to taste from the smaller overlooked regions. Like Riesling is my favorite grape. And like it's so hard to sell a Riesling, even in Ontario, where we grow great ones. It really is.
Riesling wine coach is literally on the cards in the next like month or so. So you're welcome to come back and we can talk Riesling.
I love Riesling.
I think it's like a panel. Like I was thinking today, it's like there's maybe like 7 people who want to talk about Riesling on a wine coach. So I'm like, I'm just gonna lean into it and have like a panel of 8 people just yelling about how like great Riesling is. And maybe it's like a wall of sound kind of approach where you just overwhelm people with positive opinions. Maybe I don't need one person to like clearly clarify, like crystal clear opinion about Riesling and how great it is. Maybe I just need like 6 chaos monsters, just like, rah! But maybe that's my approach.
Well, you'll have to let me know because I know a couple people who would love to join on that. Would love to talk everyone's ear off about Riesling. So
Riesling is the one wine that I have so much hesitancy to do because people just despise it. Some people just Canadians just despise Riesling. It's only Canadians. Canadians are the only nationality in the world that Ontarians who despise Riesling in the world. Everyone else loves it.
But we're so good at it. It's like
we're good at it. I know.
Thing.
Boggles my mind.
Oh, people should.
But this is it, everyone. Thank you very much for joining in Beaujolais. I really enjoyed this. I just love drinking Beaujolais, and you know, it is a wine region we talk about. We learn a lot about as sommeliers. We have to learn about, and often we don't stop to just like literally smell the roses and just enjoy Beaujolais without overthinking it and trying to interpret it historically, how to try to make it more sellable, make it more fun, make it less fun. I don't know how it works, but it'll always have a really weird place in the wine world. And you just have to acknowledge that and move through it. You know, people will have very strong opinions of it. That doesn't make if it's different to yours, it doesn't make your opinion right or wrong. That sounds so Australian, right? Make it right or wrong.
Right.
But right or wrong, it is something that everyone has an opinion about. And that's what it is. It's an opinion. If you love Beaujolais, you drink Beaujolais. It is really easy to like see people turn their nose up at Beaujolais and Gamay and thinking it's not serious and you don't really understand wine, but it's stupid nonsense.
More for us.
Hell yeah. But thanks, Chels. I appreciate you helping me taste these wines. It's so nice to just chat with you. Oh, I miss chatting with you. It's been literally years that we hang out as much as we used to. Yeah, we sell all of them in the shop. Cherry Brown. I have all of them on stock. Still don't have a website, which is really annoying, but you know, the techie people are on it, figuring out why I don't have any wine. I don't have a fucking website that I can sell wine, but every day, a step closer. Next week, I haven't decided what next week will be. Maybe it's volcanic wine. Maybe it's Riesling. Maybe it's, I don't know. But thanks. Have a lovely night, everyone. I really appreciate your time. It's such a great lineup. And this Beaujolais gives me such joy. So I'm glad I get to leave on this joyous, fun excitement, and no better person to spend it with than you, Chelsea. So have a great night. I'll see everyone soon. And Chelsea, we'll hang out. Well, let's hang out soon. Let's eat verse or something.
We'll figure it out.